We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And the big news in Washington, D.C. this week is House action on a tax bill. They were able to clear it out of their chamber, leaving action for a later date. But the House was able to pass their version of a tax bill. And Phil, at this point, we're still seeing some action on the Senate side in regards to what their bill looks like. I'm wondering, what do you see as the differences at this point between the House and Senate pieces of legislation?
There are a number of differences. In terms of talking about agriculture, they both preserve some key benefits. One, cash accounting would stay in both bills. They both would expand what we call Section 179 expensing allowance. They both would allow farms to keep deducting interest expenses. This was a very big deal going into this because they would both bills would do away with interest expensing for corporations and for larger businesses. So those are some of the big things that are different. There are some significant differences with the Senate bill. One of them is how they treat the estate tax. Both of them would double the exemption. The House would eventually repeal the tax altogether. The Senate bill, the way it is going to go to the floor, would actually would just double the exemption, but even that would expire in 2025. It's one of a number of changes, a number of sunsetting provisions that the Senate has put in because of procedural rules that prevent them from passing a tax bill like this that would increase the deficit.
So looking at the House vote breakdown, they were able to pass the bill out of that chamber with 0 Democratic votes, a handful of Republicans in opposition. That's a luxury that Senate leadership on the Republican side won't have. Wondering what you see for dialogue among Senate Democrats about what they think about this tax bill and potential implications thereof.
Well, we've seen very little evidence of Democratic support at this point. And sort of adding to the problem for Democrats is that there's Republicans are also proposing, because of this funding issue they have, of repealing the individual health care mandate. So that's added a new reason for Democrats to vote against it. On the other hand, so there's almost no sign of any Democratic support for the bill when it hits the floor after Thanksgiving. At the same time, they have a razor-thin margin with Republicans. Ron Johnson, Senator from Wisconsin, has a lot of problems with these pass-through small business provisions, which are very relevant to farmers because that's how they report their income. He does not like at all the way either the House or the Senate bill is structured on this. So, could be a bargaining position right now. He's not saying absolutely no to supporting something down the line. But then there's Senator McCain, who has problems with his questions about increasing the deficit. Bob Corker from Tennessee as well. And they have 52 votes. Republicans have 52 votes in the Senate. They need 50 with Vice President Mike Pence's vote in order to pass this out of the Senate. So it is a razor-thin margin that the Republicans are dealing with in the Senate.
And both chambers of Congress are going to be out of town next week on Thanksgiving recess, so happy Thanksgiving, enjoy your turkey. But expecting some action on the Senate on tax reform almost immediately when they return?
Right. This will be item number 1 on the priority list after Thanksgiving. And then they will have to go to conference because there are a number of differences that have to be squared here. And one of the biggest one is on how they treat pass-through businesses. Very different provisions in the House and the Senate in that respect. And there are a number of others. There's this sunsetting issue All of the individual tax provisions, as I said, including the higher state tax exemption, including these pass-through rules, would expire after 2025 in the Senate bill. So that's an issue that has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. And briefly here, just want to also mention, not so much as a week in review item, more something to watch over the weekend. Negotiators from Canada, Mexico, and the United States are going to be meeting in Mexico City to discuss the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's another round of negotiations, and we have people telling us that a lot of the provisions that are going to be discussed are on the table. At this point, they're fine-tuning things. As I'm sure all of you know, there's been a lot of action from agricultural interests this week and really in previous weeks as well, really sounding the alarm about what a potential withdrawal from NAFTA would mean to the agricultural industry. And in short, it wouldn't be good if you believe the wording coming from these groups. They are very concerned about potential withdrawal from NAFTA, and so that's something to watch this weekend, is how those negotiations shape out and see if anyone goes storming out of the room or if they're able to sing kumbaya at the end of this thing. But I'm really not holding my breath on either outcome at this point.
A couple of things, a couple of the agriculture-related issues is that the administration is pushing for this anti-dumping provision that the tomato growers in Florida want, but much of the rest of agriculture does not. That's an issue. And the administration has also been pushing Canada, without any sign of success so far, to back off on their dairy policy, the one that's caused us a big problem for ultra-filtered milk producers up in Wisconsin and New York.
So for sure something to watch there.
Yeah.
But as we mentioned, Congress is about to go on its Thanksgiving recess here, and when they return, it's looking like we're going to have another fast and furious December here. And Phil, with all of the things, all of the moving parts that are going to be happening on Capitol Hill, what should those concerned about agriculture policy be watching during the month of December?
Well, obviously, this tax bill is huge for anybody in business and all of us. The other big issue is the funding for the rest of fiscal 2018. The continuing resolution that's currently funding the government runs out on December 8th, so Congress has got to do something. The plan is to try to pass a big, we call them omnibus, big government-wide spending bill that would fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year, which runs through September 30th of next year. However, there's been no sign of progress really on that. They still don't have an agreement on the spending limits on domestic and defense spending, and so until you get that, all those numbers underneath there can't be finalized. So there's been very little sign of movement there. One of the big issues for the Farm Bill is tied to that spending bill, because there's a provision in the Senate's USDA spending bill that would provide additional assistance for dairy and cotton growers. This would really alleviate a big funding issue for the House and Senate Agriculture Committees when they sit down to write the Farm Bill next year. They really want this dealt with in this spending bill to make it easier to write that Farm Bill, and we'll have to see. Again, there's been very little sign of progress so far.
So looking like it's going to be a busy December once they return from their Thanksgiving recess. And so we'll be sure to keep you up to date on all of the news and developments from it in terms of agricultural policy during the month of December and during the rest of this week and really in the years to come here at Agri-Pulse.com. But I think that's going to do it for this week in particular. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.